Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of our LGB Alliance USA podcast. Today, we are here with James Roberts. That is the man behind HumanGayMale, a group for gay men who reject gender ideology. He is here today to talk about himself, his group, and the tour he plans on doing in the United States this September and October to engage with gay men who are critical of gender ideology. Thank you, James, for being here. Maybe you can begin by further introducing yourself and why you decided to launch HumanGayMale.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me on to talk about this. It's great to kind of connect and be part of this with you. I'm based in London in the UK. I've kind of got a background in kind of communications and charity and those sorts of in my professional life. But I've also kind of worked in various gay and LGBT sector stuff. So I've been the chair of trustees for the LGBT consortium in the UK more than a decade ago. That's kind of a membership body for all the various LGBT charities. I run networking events for gay men in London and a speed dating event in the past and that kind of thing. And then more recently, I've kind of done stuff with the LGBT Alliance in the UK and supported other groups. So I've done a load of gay stuff, so to speak, and I've kind of been aware of the kind of gender ideology and gender identity stuff for the last few years. I'd actually left most social media and I'd created the HumanGayMale Twitter account inspired by Posey Parker's adult human female definition. So I'd created that account just to follow this issue. So that's kind of where the name has come from. I've been tweeting about on that name for about 4 years now. There's also a YouTube channel that I've kind of got that I've done a few interviews in the past and we're starting to do some more stuff. So that's my kind of background in terms of getting into this. I've kind of, similar to a lot of people, have seen various videos online and then kind of falling down the rabbit hole of different interviews with different people and finding out all about the kind of all the craziness that's kind of been going on. So I think in the last year, I was thinking, what can I do, and kind of what is there a gap in terms of what we can add to the kind of fight against this kind of harmful ideology. It's kind of really obviously it's really obvious how the ideology impacts women in terms of safety and fairness and dignity. And impacts people who are same-sex attracted. But there seems to be a lot fewer in terms of gay men engaged in it. So I wanted to do something that was specifically about engaging with more gay men. The two strands, I suppose, in terms of why I've done this specifically in this way. One is about combating male isolation, which is why there's these 6 little men on our logo. There's statistics and research in the last few years about like a few decades ago, most men, so all men, not just gay men, had at least 6 close friends. And today that's a lot fewer. If you're a gay man and you speak out about gender identity issues, you could lose all your friends and be isolated. So there's a thing around gay community and male community to avoid the impact of isolation, but also engaging more gay men, because a lot of gay men won't see what's going on or won't have been aware of what's going on or won't want to speak up. So those are the kind of 2 strands. We launched in January this year in London and have been growing since then.
Great. So I'm just curious, amongst the gay men you talk to, have you noticed any change recently? Like, have you noticed that more gay men are interested in this subject and want to speak out?
Yeah, I think it's we're kind of late to the party, so to speak. Like the lesbians have noticed this years ago and have been raising the alarm bells. So yeah, it's there are gay men who have been speaking out about this, but it's much more recent compared to the women, specifically lesbians, who've been say raising the issues around gender identity and the impacts of it for a long time. I think because the impact is most obviously on women, it's kind of reached men and particularly gay men later. I think also because gay men, although a lot of gay men will have a lot of female friends, and there's kind of a bit of a stereotype, particularly like growing up, most of my friends when I was younger were girls. So I think a lot of gay men can go through life without needing to interact with women, whether that's deliberately or not needing to. Like a straight man, unless he's going to be, completely single and an incel or whatever, has to find a way to interact with women. Whereas gay men, aside from like their mum and maybe their best friend, they can go through life and not interact with women in a similar way to a lot of lesbians obviously don't engage with men generally. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think for gay men, there's probably an element of, for some, an element of it's to do with misogyny, whether that's intentional or kind of a byproduct. But yeah, for most gay men, they don't engage or interact with women, so they haven't seen the impact on women, and then the impact on gay men is kind of less obvious. It's only when you start talking about the kind of boys who are like prepubescent boys who are just going to grow up to be gay, who are being sent off to gender clinics, and the younger gay men who are being brainwashed into believing they should accept a female who calls herself a gay man as a sexual partner, or they're a bigot. So there are impacts, direct and indirect, but it's been less obvious. So I think there is a change. I think there's more gay men. I think it's more of everyone speaking up about it, but as like gay men have kind of been later to the party, so there's more of us starting to speak up as well.
Have you found when talking to gay men, is there like a particular argument that you find has been particularly persuasive in either piquing gay men or getting gay men that were already kind of skeptical more engaged against gender ideology?
Not one specifically. I think, as I say, they're thinking about putting yourself in the position of if you were the 8 or 9 year old little gay boy that you were back then today, what would you be heading to the gender clinic? Um, we're planning a conference in London in the new year, and one of the sessions is the conversation around kind of almost a deprogramming kit. What are the questions and conversations we need to have that will reach gay men who are going along with it? Because for those I've had conversations, particularly on LinkedIn, kind of more civilized conversations than Twitter, anyway, around these issues. And the one guy I met up with for a coffee, and we talked for a couple of hours, and he didn't disagree on things like children shouldn't be given puberty blockers when they don't need them. A man can't just suddenly say he's a woman and go into a women's changing room or whatever. But when he said about it depends on if they've lived as a woman, and I was what does that mean? And he had to really think about that. So I think it can be different with different people, but it's about having a logical conversation which isn't always quick. It can be you've almost got to start with the point they're at and the language they're using and start unpicking it and let them realize for themselves. So yeah, I'd love there to be like a silver bullet, and hopefully we can come up with, like I say, a shortened version of stuff that's like a deprogramming kit or a set of questions to ask. But yeah, it's a variety of things, I think.
That was another thing that intrigued me, was using LinkedIn as a way of networking on this issue, because I think you're the only person I've talked to who brought that up. It
Mm.
seems to be a neglected social network online.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's older than Facebook. Like LinkedIn's been around a long time. It's changed a lot in that time. Um, they aren't. It's not a completely free speech space in the way that Twitter is, or compared to Twitter. So you do have to be careful in terms of exactly how you phrase things. I've been suspended once, and I've currently got a post deleted by them that I'm appealing. I've had 3 or 4 posts deleted, and then I've appealed. That's been rejected. I put a ticket in to appeal it. They referred it to someone more senior, and then they said, "Oh no, that's fine. We'll put that back." Because if it gets reported and there's some kind of woke administrator, whoever, like dealing with the reports, they'll just like delete the post. Whereas actually, if you've been factual and you've not been attacking anyone and you've been civil in the way you're talking and those sorts of things, so there are restraints, so to speak, in terms of it being free speech, but you can talk about the issue. I think a lot more people are talking about it on LinkedIn, so they can't block and delete everyone, although lots of people have had posts deleted in the last week around the Olympics and boxing. So that's the one I'm appealing at the moment. But I think because it's real names and real photos, and it's your whole professional persona, so it's not like not everyone has a photo on there, but compared to somewhere like Twitter, where you can be completely anonymous, LinkedIn is much more. These are real people being themselves, so people tend to be more open to having a conversation rather than just ranting in all caps and then disappearing.
That's a good point, that it's not really quite as anonymous as some other social media stuff. And my goodness, that boxing issue has just It's so vicious in a way I haven't seen really on other gender issues. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. It used to be back in the day, a great majority of the women who transitioned were lesbians, butch lesbians. It's become much more common in recent years for women and even girls who are heterosexual to transition and identify as gay men. Have you noticed any gay men particularly concerned about that? Like the possibility of women who call themselves gay men now in gay male spaces, or is that something that's not really on most people's
Yeah.
radar?
Yeah. So people are talking about it. I think there's definitely, I think across the umbrella that is trans, which is completely meaningless because it's so many different groups for different reasons. Um, I think it is something that has been talked about, for example, at some of our events and with gay men I know and other people online. I think obviously there's not the if a straight woman calling herself a gay man goes to a gay men's single sex space, whether that's just like a like I ran speed dating, and actually towards the end of that, I did have a trans man come along, and she'd emailed me in advance, and like this is more like 12, 14 years ago. So this is before it was, well, before, definitely long before I'd kind of seen anything on it. So I kind of let her come along, not really kind of, it's, you get 3 minutes with different people, they're going to either tell or not, and they'll be fine. And I hadn't even given it really any thought at that point. So that kind of space, or whether it's like a sauna or a bathhouse, or like specifically a sex space that there are some gay men that go to, or whether it's a kind of support group specifically for gay men on health issues or whatever, there are reasons that gay men are going to want single sex gay male spaces. There's not the physical threat that there would be if that was the other way around. So a man calling himself a lesbian going into a lesbian singles night or a changing room or wherever, there's a immediate difference in terms of the physicality of the threat there that's not there for gay men, where it's a woman calling herself a gay man. But there is a detriment to, like, we should be fighting for people to have single sex spaces regardless. It's the principle of why we have it. The impacts and the advantages or whatever to different groups in different situations may be different, but the principle is we have single sex spaces for a reason. Most of the time our sex doesn't matter, but in the places it does, it really does. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that's been talked about with the people at some of the events we've done. I think yeah, I think the risk, the other kind of factor that makes me think of in terms of risk is actually for somewhere like, say, a bathhouse or even like a gay nightclub that's, not even a sex club, but if a woman is going there live action role playing as a gay man, she's putting herself in terms of physical risk. Particularly, there's a conversation that's happened here. I don't know if it's much talked about in the States, but in terms of what an offence would be here, in terms of we have like rape by deception, but sexual assault by deception. So if you're a woman pretending to be a gay man and you're in a sauna and you have sexual acts with the man that's there and he thinks you're a man, that's an assault in terms of sex by deception. So there is that kind of conversation there. So that's, again, it's not a physical threat, but there is a legality there. I think there's also a mental health issue for younger gay men who've either convinced themselves or are going along with the ideology because they see it's the right thing to do and they haven't given a lot of thought. And I know, and I've spoken about a friend of mine who doesn't talk to me anymore, who has pulled a trans man on a night out and gone back and had sex with her, but calling him him, and has now got to convince himself that that was a man. Otherwise, he's got a question. Like, he's a gay man. He's not bisexual. But he's now convinced himself that accepting a female sex partner is, part of being gay. So I think there's different impacts, but it's definitely women pretending to be gay men in gay male spaces is something that's being talked about.
Interesting. I have not heard the conversation in the US about the sexual assault by deception. Like if you claim you're a man and have sex with that claim, what does that mean legally? I've definitely heard of this being a factor in some murder defenses like there was this whole when I was in high school, there was a whole controversy where a trans identified male, who was I guess a gay male to female
Mm.
transitioner who had some sexual relationship with a man
Mhm.
who identified as heterosexual, and then he panicked when he found out that the sexual partner was
Mm.
actually a man,
Mm.
actually trans,
Yeah.
and murdered this person
Mm.
and used as a defense, well, I panicked because
Yeah.
the person deceived me, and that was a whole controversy. But horrible story. But
Yeah.
at any rate, I don't know about the laws on sexual assault. Yeah, so I mean, then just going back, then it's great that there's this organization, Human Gay Male, that's trying to build sort of social groups for gay men who are more gender critical. I'm just curious, how so tell me about the first event you held. How did it go? Did you learn any lessons from it? What went well? What
Yeah.
didn't go well?
So the launch event was in January this year, 2024. I started promoting it in at the LGBT Alliance UK conference back in October last year. Kind of just printed up some little cards with the website on, and had a t-shirt printed and just was giving them out to all the gay men there. So we launched in January, and I've said this multiple times, but I've said to people, if we have 6 of us and we've got a table in the corner in a pub somewhere, that's a start. Like, it's something. And we had 40 for the launch. So I was really pleased with that, obviously. And then we've had about 25 each month at the events in London. The last couple have been more than that. We did one in June that was on the same day as Pride in London, and we built it as like an alternative to Pride in London. And we had Gareth Roberts, no relation to me, who's the author of Gay Shame. So he came and spoke, and we had more than 70 at that for the afternoon. We've done events in Edinburgh and Glasgow and Manchester last weekend, and we've got Birmingham coming up, and then Exeter. So we're kind of starting to do all over the country based on where the clusters are on the mailing list. So some of those may only be 6 of us around a table in a pub or a restaurant, but it's a start, and it's starting to put people together. So yeah, the launch was January. We've been doing them every month since then in London, and starting to grow elsewhere. People have said, like, were you not worried about security and people coming and protesting or anything? And there's part of that is I was careful. We've only shared the venue details like a day before with the people who've RSVP'd to say they are coming. The first event was at a venue on a Friday night that had security anyway. So I was able to put in the emails, there is security on the door. So to reassure people that if there is any trouble, but then that's also almost as not even subliminal, direct message to those who may have infiltrated, signed up the mailing list or whatever, to say there is security here and they are aware of this. So I'm taking those sorts of precautions, but also have said the people who go along and protest at events like this only really go and protest if it's a women's event or if there are women there, because that's who they hate and that's why they want to go and protest at those events. Like, there's been, I'm sure you're aware, and people listening will have been aware of either conferences or speaking events and things Posey Parker has done in different countries as well, where you'll get a mob of people turning up to protest, and they're protesting because there are women there. They don't really care if it's men. I think there's also a different prospect. If you turn up to protest at an event that's all men and you don't know how many men and who those men are, there's a different, like Jordan Peterson talks about the underlying unspoken physicality between men of no one ever says, well, I could beat you up or you could beat me up. But there's kind of a, and probably less so with gay men and straight men, I would guess. But there's a different kind of factor there if you're going to go and protest at an event that's all like 24 blokes as opposed to women. So yeah, I've not expected there to be any issue, and we've not had any issue. I've had maybe 2 tweets of people directly replying to stuff saying, "Oh, we're going to come and protest at the Edinburgh and Glasgow events." Nobody did, and I've had no issue in terms of people reporting it to the venues or causing any issue, because they kind of don't care when it's men because that's not who they hate. I've also been careful with the venues. I've said to them it's a gay men's support group. I've not gone into great detail in terms of booking the venues, but I do wear the t-shirt. We've got like little signs that we put up so people know they're in the right area in the venue. And staff have seen them. We've been back to the same venue. At least 3 of our events have been at a venue we've used more than once. So again, not getting into the great detail with them, but letting them know it's a gay men's event, and we've had people be critical online, and just they're aware of it, but not going into complete detail, so they haven't got an excuse to get overly worried.
Interesting. Yeah, I think my guess is if you just wore that t-shirt, walking down the street like here, like around San Francisco or wherever, most people who are like, rabid TRA tapes probably aren't
Yeah.
going to really know what that's referring to anyway.
Yeah.
They're just going, oh, some gay
Yeah.
guys are organizing, sure.
Yeah. I was on the train. I went up to Manchester for the day for the event last weekend, and I was wearing this to go. And sat down opposite this older guy on the train, and he was on his phone and kind of like not wanting to look directly at him, but kind of I was trying to work out, is he looking at what the website is on his phone? Am I going to have to like have a conversation on the train and explain this to him? Which I was completely up for, but he wasn't, or he didn't ask any questions if he did look it up. But yeah, it's not. I am planning on doing various different merchandise with different messages and stuff on, including the pride flag with the triangle cut out, or the progress flag rather with the triangle cut out, which is a little bit more obvious, and a few other kind of slogany type ones. But yeah, it's, as I say, it's not overly obvious, but also we're not the target of the kind of people who want to cause problems for it, I think.
Yeah, funny that you bring up the flag with the progress triangle cutout. I actually wore that t-shirt
Mm-hmm.
to the Dyke March in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, no one really people didn't recognize it, at least not yet. I mean, maybe I wasn't, like openly
Yeah.
marching with my chest, yeah, this. But, and actually the shirt that I'm wearing now is SFTC, San Francisco Turf Central,
Right.
which is a group of turfy women who've
Yeah.
organized. And, the
Yeah.
acronym, people aren't gonna necessarily know what that is. I mean, it could
Yeah.
be San Francisco Track Club or something.
Yeah.
something.
I think it's about signaling those sorts of things. It's kind of a few people have said about like the secret meetings and the different things. It's kind of like how it must have been like a few decades ago, like the secret codes and stuff. But
Mhm.
it's very much I'm sure many people will be familiar with Graham Linehan and the stuff he's done in the UK. And did Gender Critical Coming Out Day, which I kind of did some of the website stuff with him for that. But the whole point of that, and we've kind of moved way beyond that in terms of people are speaking up and doing stuff, but the kind of wearing Posey Parker adult human female t-shirts, or having a suffragette flag mug, or all those different ways that you can signal to someone else that you are aware of this issue and you're engaged in it. So particularly like in the workplace or in a group of friends, or if you're even just out socially, if you're wearing a t-shirt that's got something that those who are going to know will know, it's a signal of you can talk about this. And it could be someone you don't realize believes in reality as well. You may think they're captured. So actually the things like the t-shirts and the various bits of merch, as well as kind of raising money to do stuff with, are kind of really good signal to other people who know.
Yeah, that's what I figured. And I mean, eventually they're gonna, it becomes big enough, people are gonna figure out what it means. But I've also spoken to people who said they had, very radical feminist t-shirts around, and people don't really think they don't think most people know the
Yeah.
implications of that. So yeah. So, and just to clarify, the process, if you're a gay man and you want to join, if you want to go to one of these groups, you
Yeah.
go to your website, the
Yeah, so
human.
go to the website, and there's a kind of a basic form on there to kind of get your details, to ask where you are, so you can kind of select. We've kind of expanded the locations, and then you can also put your nearest city. So USA is one of the locations, and you can put your city and state, and then that kind of gives me an idea of where groups or clusters of groups are, or there's more guys that we can look at doing an event more kind of sooner. We've got a couple of filtering questions like, is sex binary or a spectrum? And is a woman an adult human female, or anyone who identifies as a woman? Surprisingly, we have had people sign up and answer those questions incorrectly, um, which for some of them I've then sent another more detailed survey of like 5 questions of like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you agree or disagree with various things? And for a couple of them, it was clearly they just clicked the wrong thing, because then they've answered it again. And I've actually met some of those at an event. But for others, they're just activists that disagree but have signed up, and it's kind of they couldn't even bring themselves to lie in terms of what they think on a form to sign up. So there's a slight amount of filtering there. And then there's kind of emails. So I'll send emails out. There's some kind of all member emails, and then there's some based on kind of where you are in terms of cities or regions. We've got about 2/3 of the main mailing list. So we've got well over, I think we've got nearly 650 already on the mailing list. 2/3 of those are in the UK. Most of those, or at least half of those, are in London. And then the other third are a mix of about, I think it's about 100 and something, just over 100 across the US, and then the rest are kind of the rest of the world. We've got a cluster in Australia, and then kind of spread out all over. So yeah, we'll send out emails with details of the events. The events are all listed on the website as well, but then you get an email to kind of RSVP to the event, and then you'll only get sent the details of the venue kind of a day or two before if you've signed up.
And you haven't had issues with moles trying to infiltrate?
Not that I've done. I mean, there may be. I mean, there are some people on there who signed up early and haven't opened many emails or any emails. There's a couple of those, and I've done a quick scan through. So there may well be people like who've lied and signed up. Like one of the questions is, "Are you a gay male?" And I do have had a couple of people who are just supporters who aren't gay males. So they did say no, and I've replied to them and said, "Thank you for signing up and supporting, but the emails are just going to be about events for gay men, so I'm not going to keep you on the list for that." But yeah, so there could be people on there, but no one's released the venues, no one's turned up at the venues, no one's reported us to venues in terms of trying to get us in like cancelled or whatever. So I think there's almost, if they did, I don't think they care, because if it had been women or if it's been a lesbians group, they probably would have done by now. But I don't think they care. But also, there's no real advantage to them doing it, because if they do it, it just becomes a massive story for us in terms of telling more people about it. So it wouldn't close it down. There's been venues that have cancelled like a lesbian speed dating event and those sorts of things, but then I think they got reinstated or they found somewhere else. So yeah, there's no advantage to doing it. And actually it would be counter, like it'd be counter to what they'd be trying to do if they did. So yeah.
I mean, we've also noticed just with online Zoom socials that just telling people to turn on their camera
Mhm.
can really do wonders in terms of weeding out the trolls. You could say people are often, chicken hawks about. They'll be like, yeah, I'm a diehard TRA on my anonymous Twitter account, but then really they don't want to actually show their face.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
I think
yeah.
it's different now. Again, had these conversations with people. It's different every 3 to 6 months. It's so different than it was 3 to 6 months ago, but definitely from compared to like 2 or 3 years ago. So mentioning Gender Critical Coming Out Day, that's been like 3 or 4 years nearly since that one we did that. And a lot more people had anonymous accounts then. And a lot of people who I remember having anonymous accounts then aren't anonymous now. There is a valid reason why a lot of people are anonymous, particularly there's some women who, for various reasons, in terms of their own safety or their own protecting their own livelihoods in terms of being at risk at work, are anonymous for good reason. So I'm not suggesting they shouldn't be, but I have seen a lot more people, or it seems to be a lot more people who are not anonymous, and that includes people who maybe weren't engaging the conversation before. So they've got their real name and photo on their Twitter and on their LinkedIn, and it's not that they were anonymous before; they just weren't talking about it before, and now they are. So I think I think it's people are much more open. Like I'm self-employed, so I can't get fired. So I kind of feel like I should speak out and do stuff, but a lot more people are, particularly with like the various employment tribunals in the UK, and having the protected belief characteristic in terms of believing in reality. That it can be a lengthy process if you are fired or there's an issue at work, but you are legally protected. So I think that gives more people more courage to speak out.
Great. Yeah. Well, it's good to know that things are going well with your group in the UK. So let's turn to your plans for coming to the United States.
Yes.
Why, first of all, I'm just curious, why you want to do this. I mean, I can tell why. I mean, the US needs something like this, really.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm just curious what made you ultimately make the decision
Yeah.
to
So I was planning to be in the US actually about now, or in the last 2 weeks, we were planning. My boyfriend and I were over there last autumn in New York and San Francisco. I've got friends in Dallas, so we're planning on doing a trip and going to a couple of places, and mostly being in Dallas. That kind of got pushed back, and then other things have changed. So I'm now he's done some traveling on his own. I'm now doing this traveling on my own, and have kind of bolted on lots of things. I basically used up all my air miles to kind of get really cheap flights or near enough free flights, which has been really helpful. And I'm staying with some people I know, so I've kind of done it on as tight a budget as possible. But it means I've got 2.5 to 3 weeks where it means I can get to 6 cities, including one in Canada. Um, I didn't necessarily particularly promote the signing up to the mailing list as being global when I started. It was primarily going to be London because it's easy to do events here because there are the cluster of gay men here. But people were signing up all over the world right from the beginning. I've done another podcast that had a mainly American audience, so a lot more people signed up from that. So there's an audience there. I've had people been following gay guys on Twitter for a while in America. So there's definitely an audience of gay men who are already gender critical or sex realist or however they want to describe it in the States. But I think it's the importance of doing it. So as I say, New York will have more, and probably San Francisco will have more, but Dallas, there might just be 4 of us, and we'll go for lunch, and that's fine. It's a start, and then that's something that can be built. I think doing it and saying it's happening, and this is something that's going to grow, is a start. It's really important. It's really important to kind of across the whole movement or non-movement that is tackling gender identity ideology, but particularly for gay men. I think we both in terms of standing up alongside women and lesbians, particularly standing up for the kids who are, particularly going to grow up to be gay men and lesbians, but also in our own right as gay men, we have a responsibility to tackle the issue in terms of how it impacts us. So yeah, I think it's partly I was planning on coming anyway, partly knowing it's so important and knowing that there are guys who are already signing up and wanting to come. So I'm not going to be doing all the events forever. I'll go to them when I can and help launch some stuff. But the whole idea of this is I'm happy to kind of run a mailing list on the website, but then in almost like a chapters structure. If there are guys that want to run an event somewhere, they can pick a venue, tell me the details, and we'll send the email out. That's ideally how I want this to kind of grow. I'd like to kind of develop some kind of maybe not an app, but like a website, like a membership website. People can log in and have discussion boards and kind of connect with other gay men who are near them. So yeah, the tour this September, October is because I'm going to be in the States. But then after that, it's kind of down to any gay men anywhere in the US that want to help organize an event. And I say that could be 3 or 4 guys in one city go out for lunch or drinks, and it starts somewhere and then connects with other gay guys. We're doing the conference in London in January. On the member survey I've just done, there are some guys who are in America who've said they would want to go to a conference like that. So that could be something I'd be happy to help organize and be part of in the States if gay men want to kind of grow it to that level. But yeah, as I say, to begin with, it's just getting it started.
That sounds like a good plan to have sort of started out and then maybe have local, I don't know if you necessarily would call them chapters, but have, local group subgroups organized. Like sometimes, in our LGBT Alliance USA meetings, people will ask, do you know of any in-person things like because a lot of people are just starved for anybody who agrees with them in person. And I can sometimes give references, if they're from Northern California, I can give references to a women's group. But it would be great if we could give, more references for gay men. So that's good to hear. And I'm just looking at your schedule. You have I'm just gonna say what the schedule is. It looks like first event is September 22nd at 2 p.m. in New York. Then September 26th, 6 p.m. in Chicago. September 28th, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. October 2nd, 6 p.m. in Dallas. And October 8th, 6 p.m. in Washington, D.C.
The last couple of those may not. But the friend I'm visiting in Dallas, because of family and someone going in for surgery and various things, that may be changing. So we might be bringing the Dallas one might change to the day before, and then the Washington one may move, because currently it's a Tuesday evening, so that may move back to the Sunday afternoon. But as soon as that's confirmed, that'll be on the website. So yeah, it'll be within a couple of days of those dates. The last two of the others are set because my flights and where I'm staying is set. So I've got to be in those places.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, US is such a big country and
Yeah.
it's hard to know exactly where to go here at, LGBT Alliance USA. We're spread all over the country, so we have to organize
Yeah.
everything online. And sometimes we can like, if there's a particular event, maybe like two of us will could meet in person, but it's
Yeah.
it's very hard. Yeah. So that's good. So you mentioned before, sort of some upcoming thoughts and what you maybe want to, make a subscription website or something like that. I'm just curious, have you gotten any pushback or anything from other gender critical people? Or is it
Not
been
that
a
not that
positive?
I've seen.
Okay, good.
Like I've been a few times to Posey Parker, Kelly J. Keen stuff in Hyde Park here in London, and never spoken. Although men can speak at the end if there's all the women who want to speak have spoken. So I went. It was the day after, or 2 days after our launch in January, and just mentioned it and said, it's important that gay men engage in this both for themselves and to support and stand alongside the women who are doing their thing. And it was well received. And again, someone acknowledged isn't it crazy that the gay men can go and do this and have no one protest, but if lesbians did it, they'd get a load of hassle. So I think there's an acknowledgement that it's a different experience for gay men doing this kind of thing than it is for women, but that it's important that groups can do their own thing and they have the right to do that. Although saying that, the Glasgow event that we did a couple of weeks ago, there was a guy who came to that who he said even on the morning he was kind of nervous about whether he should go or not because he wasn't sure what would happen or if people would be there that would cause trouble. And even though it was kind of a pub that's kind of got little spaces and different rooms almost, we were in a separate room, although not with a closing door. But even in there, he said he felt like almost uneasy that he's talking about this in public and he hasn't done that. And that's kind of weird. There's a couple of the guys, at least, who've come to the London one who live a little bit further out than London. Um, it's been the first time they've been able to talk to anyone about this. And it's almost like a therapy session, kind of getting it all out in terms of their experience of understanding all the craziness and losing their circle of friends and not being able to talk about it. It's providing that kind of outlet as well as a kind of connection and community. If we can do that, at the moment, I want to focus on the real life stuff, particularly having gone through COVIDs and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff and doing more stuff in person again. But because of the nature of being so spread out, to have some online virtual connections is something that I want to do as well.
Oh, that's good to hear. I was curious specifically, like occasionally online, and this is like really, take what you see on Twitter with a
Mm.
grain of salt, but sometimes you see some little spats that occur with
Mm.
some gender critical women
Yeah,
versus gay men. I, I don't know
yeah,
if
that's
you've
definitely
encountered
yeah. I
any
think
of
there's
that or
definitely that there. I think there's um, how to be diplomatic. There's definitely, I mean, Twitter's not great for nuance a lot of the time, and written word, you can't always take what people's intended tone is. There's a load of that in terms of caveats. I think there's a minority of gay men who are misogynistic, whether that's intentional or just from not being factoring women into their lives because they don't need to. By no means the majority of gay men. Most of us are lovely. And there are a small minority of women who understandably don't like men. If you look at the history of particularly women who've been in abusive relationships, with successive abusive relationships, or if a lot of men in their lives have been abusive, the majority of women will have experienced some kind of, whether even if it's not an actual sexual assault directly, like a flasher or whatever. So it's understandable where at least a cautiousness about men comes from. But I think there is a small number of women who are just don't like men. Fair enough. And that when you get those two groups together on Twitter, that's kind of causes issues. Um, I've not had any problems with doing these events with that. It's kind of been people have been supportive. Like in the past, like when I was first on Twitter, or maybe in the first year of being on Twitter with this handle, I fell into a couple of not traps, but kind of trenches, I suppose. Between I'd say something where I'm agreeing with one set of women, and then another woman disagreed with that and was kind of berating me for not agreeing with her because she's a woman. Like, but I'm agreeing with the other women. Like, who like who am I supposed to agree with? So there is a bit of it sadly it's the identity politics that the far left and all the wokeness trade in does seep into, well, if you're this thing, you're either for or against this other thing, and actually that it's, most of the time it's not really like that in real life.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I haven't encountered us so much in real life. I think there's room for like different groups with different sets of boundaries. It's important to have
Yeah.
gay male groups like yours engaged. And then they're important to have groups like us, which are LGB,
Uh-huh.
generically LGB. And then they're important to have lesbian specific groups. And
Yeah.
there's, women's groups, and there's specifically radical feminist groups. And if we can
Yeah.
all just agree that
Yeah.
different groups we're in this fight together, but we can have different groups with different specific niche interests, then
Yeah.
we should be
Yeah.
complaining about it. It's good.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
talked about it as being a non-movement because it's not a single movement. There's a large part of it that is a women's rights movement, but even within that, there's kind of people who won't call themselves feminists, or women who wouldn't use the word feminist, and others that do and want to reclaim more original use of the word feminists. There's radical feminists, even if they wouldn't call themselves feminists, they're kind of radical. So yeah, even within the broadest part of this, there's lots of different. They're not factions, but sections, as it were. But we aren't one movement. We happen to have a common enemy, and it's going to take multiple strands and multiple approaches to kind of tackle it. Whether that's the women's rights, LGB and same-sex attracted rights, specifically lesbians or gay men within that, whether it's about protecting children, whether it's about protecting free speech, whether it's just about protecting reality and being scientifically accurate. There's a whole range of reasons people might be in this, and they'll overlap. But every minute we spend attacking each other, even when we disagree, there's a minute we could have been doing something to take down the common enemy. We can get back to disagreeing with each other about the other things later. And again, it's another. I think it's more so in the US than it is here, given that the left-right of politics there is that things are either all in one camp or all in the other, and you can tell what people are supposed to think, at least because of which party they are aligned to, or if they think on one issue indicates what they're going to think on another issue. We've got a bit more diversity politically in the UK because of the range of political parties, because of things like Brexit didn't fall down a left-right divide. The Scottish referendum on independence didn't fall down a left-right divide. So we've got many more axes of difference. So we will have people who are in the gender critical or sex realist movement or non-movement who disagree massively on other issues, but we have a common enemy on this. So actually, it's going to take multiple strands and multiple approaches to kind of tackle it.
Yeah, and that's something I find really frustrating in the US is like they'll just always paint us that we're all part of this far right religious right agenda. I was in Sacramento a few months ago testifying against a bill about that would make it a bill that would make it harder for schools to disclose children's like if they've transitioned to their parents. And you look at the coalition of people who were speaking out, because people from the general public could go and give their little 30-second, I'm for or against it. I came dressed in rainbows and saying, I'm here for LGBT Alliance USA. I'm lesbian. There were other lesbians there. There was at least one gay man there who spoke out. And you had some women's groups. You had someone from like feminist groups. And yes, you also had groups that were, religious groups or conservative groups. And you have groups that are sort of more, I would say, like centrist groups, like Moms for Liberty. I actually had a whole nice chat with someone from Moms for Liberty who is, herself wearing a Bible verse T-shirt, but then saying how much she appreciates all the work that lesbians in Moms for Liberty are doing. And I'm like,
Mm.
in the real world, there are a lot of success stories of
Yeah.
people working together and not making this a partisan thing. And then you have people online, and you have politicians like Scott Wiener saying, this is all a
Mm.
right wing thing, and
Yeah.
it's a huge
Yeah.
point.
The accusation of right wing, like here, like most of the people I know through doing this in the last few years are traditional lefties in terms of they are left or left of center, in terms of the UK politics. Even various religious groups here are not assumed to be right wing in terms of their politics, even if they're more, some are more conservative with a small c, but there's a lot of help the poor type stuff in terms of religion here, or faith groups here, or has been. So yeah, there's not that's a big difference compared to the US. But I think the accusation of right wing and far right, particularly with the stuff that's going on in the UK now in terms of people protesting about immigration and the counter protests, and that far right is the thing that's being thrown around. And I think there is an element of far right within that, but it's used in the same way that transphobe or bigot or racist is used. It's kind of, we're going to say a thing that even 5 years ago, and actually some people in the workplace still today maybe, but it's kind of, if you say that in polite society or at work and you accuse someone of one of those things, it's the worst thing they could be, and so they don't want to be seen as that at all. So it'll shut them down. I think that's how far right is one of those words, in the way that people have called us transphobes to shut us down. It's kind of, I don't care, because I don't hate anyone. I'm just talking about reality and the impacts of an ideology. So you can label me whatever you want. I'm not going to shut up.
Right. Yeah, and that's why it's so important, I think, that we just keep doing the work that we're doing, and with this sort of diverse,
Mhm.
I don't know if you can even really call it a coalition, but what you are, organize what you are, and other
Yeah.
people will organize what they are, and we'll all approach this with our own angles. And so,
And they're
yeah.
complementary as well. So there's um, a British scientist. Her account is fond of Beatles, Emma Hilton, who's part of Sex Matters, or on the advisory board, I think, for Sex Matters. And she's talked about, so she goes into kind of sporting bodies and various places as the boardroom and doing a PowerPoint presentation about the data in terms of sex differences and strength and speed and risk and all those sorts of things. And she said she couldn't go and do that at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park with Posey Parker because it's a PowerPoint presentation in a boardroom. She couldn't do that there. But equally, the kind of people going on kind of more protesty type of actions wouldn't get across to people in the boardroom. But the kind of more grassroots, um, direct stuff, people speaking, that people like Posey Parker and those sorts of groups do, spreads the word more. That then means that the people that Emma is presenting to in the boardroom have heard about this at least, and therefore it makes it easier for her to get her bit across. So actually they work in conjunction with each other, all the different approaches. I think there's some people within various factions who don't like that. I think there's a really small minority, and it's not the people whose names are associated with it in terms of people leading these things, but some people involved in some of these things, or just individuals, kind of want ownership of the win. And it's kind of, we're a long way from winning, and I don't care who things who to attribute successes to. We've just got to succeed. So I think there's a very small number of people who seem more concerned with taking the credit for stuff. As I say, not the people who are actually organizing the things and the names people will know. They, having spoken to or known some of those, they're, I've only ever met people who I think are genuine. So that's, but yeah, there's a complementary nature to the various approaches that are going to help us kind of, defeat the common enemy.
Yeah, good point. And it's a matter of perpetual dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in all these different, sex realist, gender critical groups, whether it's
Yeah.
our group or other feminist groups, or whatnot, um, is how, if and how to work with people who don't agree with you
Mm-hmm.
ideologically. And that could include people who are maybe more conservative than you are. Where do you draw the line about what you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it can get complicated, and it might be a little bit more complicated in the US because the religious right is much stronger here.
Yeah.
But, and so, that creates some more points of
Yeah.
tension with.
Yeah. Like I'm expecting most, well, from what I've heard back, I think I'm probably expecting most of the guys that will come to the events that I'm doing in the US are more likely to be Republican, or at least Republican voters. But that's not to say, I definitely know there are Democrats on the list and who I'm in touch with and who I know. The DC event is a month before the election, so that will be interesting. But yeah, I know people have said about being worried about coming to something and it being seen as being politically aligned. And just to be clear, if I haven't been already, this is not aligned to any kind of political left, right, any party. It's kind of across everyone who believes in reality who's a gay man can be part of this. So I think it is important to be able to work with people that you can disagree with. And like it's definitely a kind of a British principle, I guess. But I think more so I would think of it as a US one in terms of free speech, is I may not agree with you, but I will defend your right to say stuff I disagree with, because we have the right to free speech. And I'll defend your right even if you're saying something that disagrees with me.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation about maybe there are more Republican gay men that you've been in touch with who are interested in coming. I'm curious to see how it.
It may just be that there's more of them who are prepared to say stuff
Yeah.
publicly in terms of being on Twitter with their real name and photo, in that they're not going to be, I think, more in the US, particularly, more Democrat associated men are going to be kind of like the gay men who are going along with it but don't really believe it, but can't speak up, either because they fear being isolated, they fear kind of impact of that for them in their workplace or whatever. So yeah, it would be interesting to see who turns
Mhm.
up.
Yeah. Do you have any final words, any closing thoughts you want to share?
I would say so. I've written a piece for you guys to share on your Substack that kind of goes into a lot more detail. I've written on Graham Linen's Substack and on my own LinkedIn some articles. If people want more information about some of the reasoning and the stuff that's behind this idea, take a look there. You can find HumanGayMale on Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube, all using HumanGayMale. The LinkedIn is just a holding page, but if you search the hashtag, you'll find me and my posts. And there's a lot of posts in June because I spent all of June correcting myths about what happened at Stonewall during Pride Month, with people saying, you wrote all your rights to the trans women of color who threw the first brick. I'm like, no, wasn't trans, wasn't there. Lots happened. So yeah, come and find me and what we're doing on social media. But if you're a gay male anywhere in the world, particularly in the US, sign up on the website. And if you're in one of those cities, definitely sign up and try and come along. And just tell, if you're not a gay male, tell all your gay male friends, because I think across any group that's involved in this issue, the more people it's a numbers game. The more people we can engage, the better. The more people we reach, the more change we can make in the workplace, in local politics, national politics. But particularly gay men, I think we need to reach so that if they already do believe in reality, they know they're not alone, and there's a community of gay men who also still believe in reality. But also to find ways to reach more gay men who have been going along with it and need to wake up.
Great. Thank you so much for coming onto our show, and we wish you the best of luck for your American trip and all of your future ventures.
Great. Thank you. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
If you wish to find out more about HumanGayMale and or sign up for their social events, please go to humangaymale.com. If you wish to learn more about LGB Alliance USA's upcoming events or make a donation to us, please visit lgbausa.org. Thank you, and remember to like and subscribe.